Thank you, everyone. Let's get started. Thank you. A very warm welcome today to this regional opening of the Race to Transition Asia event series. My name is Jasper Hilkhuizen, and I'll be your MC for today. Now, today's event actually is the opening event of the first out of 4 total events that will take place in the coming 2 weeks, hosted by 4 different cities across the region. Now, as you know, this is all building up to COP28, which will take place in Dubai, starting from the end of this month. Now, this event wouldn't have been made possible with a lot of different organizations. You can see them right behind me. We have our strategic partners, Civic Exchange, IC Hong Kong, the Resilient Cities Network, and the World Resources Institute. For today, the event partners are ESCAP, ESBN, and also the Hong Kong Green Finance Association. So very much thanks to them. We also have 12 supporting organizations that helped us a lot. So please respect them. So today, actually, we have 2 panel discussions, as you may know. The first one is the road to COP28, driving collective climate action across Asia. The second one is scaling corporate transition towards a sustainable future. So for those who are joining us online, please feel free to post any question you have for our speakers in the chat box, the little Q&A button. For everybody here physically present in the Zero Carbon Park, we have some microphones circling around later on to take some questions, if time allows, after each panel discussion. One last friendly reminder for those also here physically present, that after the second panel discussion, we have a bit of a networking session which will start around 4 p.m. and will last until 5:30 p.m. So do please stick around for that as well. Now, without further ado, I'll pass the floor to Dr. Andy Lee, Arab's East Asia Region Chair, to kick off today's event. Dr. Lee, over to you.
Thank you. CF, Christine, Ben, Jenny, Donald, Jim, and George, who's online with us. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to this opening event of the Race to Transition Asia series. 1 year ago, prior to COP27, we organized the Race to Resilient event series and called for actions to move from target setting into implementation. COP27 saw significant progress on adaptation, including a groundbreaking agreement to establish a loss and damage fund to support vulnerable countries hit by climate disasters. But we can't stop here. At the end of this month, world leaders will come together in Dubai. COP28 is important for several reasons. One of them is it marks the conclusion of the first global stocktake. It is apparent the world is not on track towards meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement, with the rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a sustainable future. COP28 is the moment for world leaders to come up with solutions to accelerate climate actions. As an industrial leader in sustainable development and resilient building, Arab recognizes the power of collaboration and inclusivity. Hence, we are proud to organize this pre-COP event series once again, bringing together influential experts and leaders from various sectors, including build, energy, and finance, to share latest insights and discuss the pressing aspects of climate change across Asia. Asia is one of the most vulnerable regions facing different climate changes, including extensive coastal populations susceptible to sea level rises, large river basins prone to flooding, and low-lying inhabited islands. At the same time, Asia also accounts for about half of the world's carbon emissions. Therefore, it is important for Asia to play a pivotal role in driving the transition and build a climate-resilient future. Supported by various strategic partners and supporting organizations, this event series takes place across 4 major cities in Asia, including Hong Kong, Manila, Shanghai, and Tokyo. It will feature over 20 renowned experts to share their views and experiences. Today's event marks the opening of the series, and during these 2 weeks, we will look at issues pertinent to each hosting city, ranging from circular economy to water infrastructure and management to sustainable building design. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to our series strategic partners, our Hong Kong event partners, and supporting organizations, as well as speakers for their great support. I hope you enjoy this and the subsequent sessions. Collaborations is like a puzzle. Each person brings a unique piece, and when you get them all together, you create a masterpiece that's greater than the sum of its parts. Through exchange and partnership, let's work together to transit towards a more sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. We'll now move on to our first panel discussion, moderated by Professor Christine Low, who is the Chief Development Strategist at the Institute for the Environment of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. She's a former Undersecretary for the Environment at the Hong Kong SCR government and a former legislator. Now, the panelists of today are Mr. C.F. Wong. Mr. C.F. Wong is the Commissioner for Climate Change of the Hong Kong SCR government. Joining us virtually, we have Dr. George Lam. He's the chair of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific Sustainable Business Network. Last but not least, we have Ben McQuay. He's the vice president of the Hong Kong Green Finance Association and founder of Ben McQuay and Company. Professor Low, I leave it up to you to run this panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I regard this as the first of the events closest to going towards COP28. And I think some of you in the audience are going. And as Andy explained to us, well, you all know the science, you all know we're not doing very well, you all know the first stock taking is actually really important, because the stock taking is like the accountability check for whether the commitments that various countries have made, whether we are on target. We have some idea what's in this report. We know we're not doing as well, but I hope that because this is the first stock take, and then after the stock take, it's actually recommitment. So there's an opportunity for countries to advance what they really need to do. And one of the things that Andy also reminded us is the vulnerability in this area and the importance of collaboration. So I think you're all here because you're now deeply invested in this issue. You know what we need to do in Hong Kong. Your business area includes obviously the mainland, as well as increasingly to other parts of the world, particularly in this region of Asia Pacific, and that we actually need people from across disciplines to collaborate. So I today will moderate a discussion. We have a government official. We have someone who's very familiar with Asia Pacific, and we have someone who represents the Hong Kong Green Finance Association. So I'm going to go straight to George. We don't want, George, you to feel left out just because you're not here in person. George, since you are very familiar with ESCAP and you work with business groups in Asia, I wonder if you can share with us how you really think the business sector is doing. Of course, governments have their policies, timelines, and commitments, but the people who have to deliver, actually, a lot of it has to do with the private sector. So how are we doing there?
Oh, thank you, Christine. My pleasure indeed to join you and the panel and all of our sustainability champions on site. My quick answer to your very important question is that the private sector is indeed absolutely important because it possesses abundant resources, particularly in green finance and also innovation and technology. Now, as you know, the UN, the United Nations ESCAP, is the largest division, covering the Asia and Pacific region. And this is also where the biggest problem is, because as Dr. Lee mentioned, Asia Pacific already accounted for more than half of the carbon emissions in the world. We are also the fastest and largest, fastest growing and largest economy of the world, and the most polluting. So the climate change crisis war has to be won or lost in our region. And the key to success, if any, is really the private sector's full contribution to that. And I mean faster and more contributions and smarter and greener solutions at the same time. And this is really where the private sector comes in. And this is why ESCAP set up the ESCAP Sustainable Business Network, or ESBN, and that is to mobilize the private sector. And now we are coming up with a Green Deal for Asia Pacific. So that is to mobilize more and faster private sector contributions towards green energy transition, green finance, green infrastructure, circular economy initiatives, and also green innovation. I think the tasks that the private sector can undertake, are clearly a long list. But I think it's not easy because you mentioned COP28, and I must say that I also look forward to COP28 because I have seen the changes in terms of the actions taken by members of the ESCAP Sustainable Business Network, from COP to COP. For example, right now we are fully engaging major corporations as well, not just at SMEs. We have to work together, and that is very important because you have more resources mobilized, and then we want to see more industry or sectoral cooperation rather than single company initiatives. We also like to, see more achievement in terms of SDG 17, which is partnerships for the goals for 17 SDGs. We all know that the SDGs are not on the right track. One estimate is that around 15% of the 17 SDGs are really on track. The rest is really very difficult. So I think this is where the private sector has to do more with governments and communities. Otherwise, there's no chance that we can win this climate change crisis war.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding us that we're going to meet our commitment, and it depends a lot on Asia and what happens here. CF, now, of course, you are our climate commissioner, and we all know you very well. Now, rather than ask you about government policy, because I think people here actually know what the commitments are. So instead, I'm going to ask you, what would you like the private sector to do? I mean, how can the private sector here help you to meet your target and maybe even to exceed them?
Thanks, Christine. I love to have this opportunity to network with a lot of business leaders. And actually, the Climate Office was established in earlier this year, and one of the mission of the office is to engage the business sector to promote the kind of government policy, the kind of climate action plan we have for the whole city, and at the same time to solicit the support and participation of everybody in this endeavor.
There's a fly. A fly in the wall. They want to know what we are saying. Go on, CF.
So in talking about the business sector, I actually love to share with some kind of personal experience with everybody here. Christine, you know that I was engaged in promotion of climate change somehow a decade ago. At that point of time, when we tried to engage with the business sector and to try to solicit supporting action in climate change, we are trying to persuade the business organization from a corporate social responsibility approach. So in many of these cases, we are lucky to have the support of the big leaders, and they also join us to become some sort of, for example, the carbon audit partners, to take lead in the society to do some kind of carbon management. But as I said, that is the kind of initiative from corporate social responsibility. That means you make money, you give some donation. But now, since I took over the climate change office earlier this year, I can say that the level of interest and the depth of involvement is a totally different ballgame nowadays. Very probably because of the evolving ESG requirement around the world and the recognition of the business sector on the need to handle this kind of emerging challenge. I can talk a bit more about the challenge, the kind of risk management later, but coming back, I think the business society is getting more prepared nowadays to play a part in this carbon neutrality journey, and so we are very lucky to have that. In moving forward, we hope that the business sector can gear up to, in addition to the kind of carbon appreciation, carbon management of their own operation, to set bold target visions to achieve carbon neutrality before too late. So this is the kind of appealing action we are trying to get the support of the business sector. And over the past few months, we have been engaging with various business organizations to try to grab upon those support from those sectorial leaders and try to ask them, because you have gone through the kind of journey you have so far to move up the ladder from carbon audit, setting reduction target, visions for carbon neutral, and even making influence to their business partner, I think we should solicit the support of this kind of business leader to set out their vision and to engage the rest of the sector to contribute.
Right. I guess your work has been greatly assisted by the financial regulators, right, who have mandated banks to disclose their climate risk and to require listed companies to disclose and report. So I think that's very helpful to you. So Ben, perhaps I can ask you, you're one of the earliest members, if not one of the founding members, I think, of the Hong Kong Green Finance Association. And more than anyone else, the association has done tremendous work over the last few years to really get people to focus on the money part, because we all know no money, no talk. So Hong Kong is the place where we want to organize the money, to intermediate money to go into greener projects. So how do you see companies doing?
Well, I think we tend to look at the sort of private sector. We look at the contribution that the private sector needs to make to this huge task that we have ahead of us. So perhaps first thing we've got to think about is, well, what do we mean by private sector? And I think when we talk about non-public sort of institutions, corporates, individuals, etc., as a sort of holistic, sort of globally and holistically, then I think we heard it from Andy, and I think the FCCC sort of update report says it all. We're nowhere near where we need to be. Okay, so the question is, well, to what extent, is or can the private sector in Hong Kong sort of step up, do more, contribute more, lead to sort of greater, I guess, sort of acceleration and scale and all these sorts of important things. And I think, there's Hong Kong private sector is coming to the table, but I think for most, then climate action is driven probably first and primarily by compliance, and to an extent by what sort of investors and stakeholders and shareholders want. Okay, so at the moment, I think we're still in a phase where, by and large, of course, there are champions in every sector and every industry, of course there are, but, across the board, we're still in a, let's do the minimum we need to in order to be compliant and in order to keep stakeholders happy. And I think we also have to be mindful that, where we are right now with sort of the economic outlook, the global economic outlook and sort of, geopolitical tensions here, there, and everywhere, so some of these things that we think should be priorities for our private sector are perhaps sort of, I don't know, dropping down a little bit on the priority list, and that's something that we need to tackle. So specifically for listed companies in Hong Kong, then we focus on climate reporting, but we don't yet focus nearly enough on climate action and impact. And so whilst I doubt that many within the private sector are really embracing sort of climate resilience and the opportunity that presents in a way that presents or sort of redefines business as usual, we are sort of stepping up to the extent of compliance, but I would say at a pretty low level. And I think we've got to mention that SMEs, I don't think that SMEs are served at all yet in order to help, providing the tools necessary to help SMEs deliver and contribute on decarbonisation as well. And so I think all this brings us, I think, to a very important topic, and that's whose responsibility is it to mobilise the private sector to deliver on sort of government policy level decarbonisation, net zero carbon targets. And that's a whole different conversation topic, so I'll stop there.
Well, I think some people will point to you, CF, that you are responsible. But actually, I think I'm not, not putting pressure on you. But
I stand ready to respond.
Oh, fantastic. But I think what it is we are going, we're going from listed companies. And Ben, I hear what you're saying. Doing reporting is not the same as taking climate action. You could have a terrific report, but you're not doing much. We just need to remember that. And I think, CF, you were really also not just referring to the big companies, you were talking about how to get society involved. Now, we'll come to this in a minute. I have to hold this contraption because there may be questions. These will be questions online, but since you're in person, you are free later on, because I'm going to call on you. You can make comments or ask questions of the panel. But before we get back to this, George, we haven't forgotten you. Now, you talked about companies in Asia, and I wondered whether you can give us some examples, some positive examples of what they're doing.
Yeah, well, another great question, Christine. I think, for example, we have seen, companies in Hong Kong like China Light and Power, CLP, doing extremely well, leading the green energy transformation process, and not just in Hong Kong, but globally as well. We also have seen HSBC doing a lot of good work in terms of green finance, very committed, and being a major bank from Hong Kong, and we should be very proud of that. And I think the list is long, including Cathay Pacific, for example, working very hard, I'm sure, towards adoption of green fuels, and all the other measures. And then we have people like ESCO Group, major textile company, already a leading force in circular economy initiatives. I think not just the major companies, we also have seen SMEs doing just that. People in the green tech and green food sector, for example, people in all sorts of energy saving, emission cutting, startups. So I think we do have very good examples of more and faster and greener and smarter solutions from the private sector. I also have seen government actions picking up as well, to particularly, I like to particularly give this credit to the Hong Kong SAR government. I think not because CF you are here alone, but of course you are a good friend. I think we are on track definitely towards becoming Asia's green finance hub and center of excellence for ESG investing. So you can see policy initiative after initiative, and you see even very innovative solutions such as tokenized green bonds, and also an increasing effort towards integrating, converging green tech, green finance, and fintech. So I think this is marvelous. I think Hong Kong is well positioned to take the lead in terms of regional technical assistance, regional cooperation, working with developing economies in the region to really achieve the green transformation process in a smart way, not just in a hard way. And I think, as you said, Christine, earlier, no money, no talk. I think in Hong Kong, I think the private sector now is also leading the effort to deploy more ESG capital to green projects. So earlier, we saw a lot of ESG capital, but very little deployment compared to that. But now I see the deployment rate is getting higher and the speed faster. And recently, you could also see the establishment of the Hong Kong Investment Corporation, which is a strategic investment platform of Hong Kong. And I'm sure Hong Kong IC will have a clear green tech and green finance and green transformation portfolio going forward. So, I can stay here and talk about some very motivating examples for an hour or two, but I think I just give you a few examples. So it's not just sad news.
Thank you. Well, I think I know quite a few people in the audience. Actually, Hong Kong do some pretty good things. Hong Kong companies are not devoid of actually making some amazing efforts. And Arab, you have been helping companies, right, to get some of these things done. But we in Hong Kong, we generally like to rag on ourselves. We always keep telling ourselves that we are not good enough, and maybe we can be much better. But CF, now, one of the things you want to do, it's actually bring people together, right, so that we can cooperate. So, and I think you have a reasonable idea, all the positive things, right? Who's doing what, all these positive things. How can we line up, catalog, right? All these great things, companies and efforts and technologies and pots of money, particularly from the government and also the private sector. If we had a good list of these things, how can we help you? One is to go within government to your higher echelon to say better alignment of policies and efforts will help. And then how can we help you to go into the private sector with some new government thoughts about how we can cooperate so that we can greatly expand the efforts in Hong Kong?
Thanks, Christine. In addressing this question, I actually want to agree with Ben on the importance of compliance in setting a scene for the basic requirement for the society to follow in achieving a greater goal. But I think climate change is a little bit different these days. That is why we found that the ESG has been very powerful, because not only of its requirement for listed company to comply the reporting requirement, but also because of the kind of mentality it introduced to the company to become conscious about the need to manage the risk brought about by climate change. It's not only the kind of physical risk, it's also about transition risk. I'm mindful of the title of today's talk is about race to transition. So actually, in our interaction with many of this company, so they are fully aware of the business challenge in facing the transition risk because of the change of technologies, because of the change of the requirement from their investor, from their client, as well as the uncertainty in the regulatory regimes. These are very important issues for them to address in advance, not only because of the need to comply with government's requirement, because without the foresight to look into this climate risk, transition risk, their very profitable business will turn into a kind of old business in just a few years. So in our course of action in liaise with the business sector, we try to impress them on the business risk, on the transition risk they are having in front of them. And because of this COP from time to time, because of the global consensus reached from time to time, more uncertainty in terms of regulation, more uncertainty in terms of technology development, more uncertainty in terms of the financial arrangement in the business sector will come upon to them. So with this kind of concept, with this kind of ideas, I think they will come together and work together with us in a necessary way to achieve the common goal of carbon neutrality. And so to answer your question straightly, so let us tell all the business sector, regardless they are listed company or SME, the risk ahead, the transition risk ahead, so that they can work together with us.
Well, before I ask you to comment, Ben, I wonder if I can ask the audience to already think about what CF has just told us. I haven't heard the government say this before. What he is saying is that risk and opportunities. There are risks out there for businesses in terms of the general geopolitical environment, with technology, with many issues that you are having to grapple with. And he is saying that if we don't step up, right, if companies don't step up, there may not be a business for them going too far out. Right? This is a very significant message. So I'm going to go to Ben, but I want you to think about whether you can think of some ideas for us, particularly for CF, where you can help us to campaign in Hong Kong, because it isn't going to just happen, right? We need to reach out to each other. We need to reach out through associations, professional bodies, district bodies, and so on, to get what is needed. The scope 3, right, to get people to report, to step up and think about what they can do. So I want we will have 10 minutes or so where we can hear from you. But Ben, now that you've heard what CF, the warning, right, what CF said, how would you react?
Well, let me first react by saying, this is very sort of positive words, encouraging words. I mean, we've all known all along that, that in order to tackle the challenge in front of us, we have to collaborate. That's public sector side, private sector side. We know from a sort of a business community perspective that those who collaborate most are likely to sort of win more when business plans have been sort of modified and adapted, and we all have much more resilient businesses. And so, what we haven't done very well historically, in my view, is really sort of bridge that gap. Public sector tends to deal with public sector stuff and responsibilities and leave the private sector to deal with private sector stuff and responsibilities. And I think there's a realization increasingly that, you know, if we continue down that, I guess, with that sort of type of strategy, then we're not going to achieve very much anytime soon, and we just don't have the time to dawdle on this. And so I'm very encouraged by that. And George mentioned something which is hugely important, and that's government money. You know, there has been pockets of money available, really on the sort of the grant side, startup, early incubation type money. We need sort of serious money, what people are referring to as that kind of Temasek-esque type investment for Hong Kong Inc., as it were, to really put serious PE type of money into the projects that we want to support. And of course, we've got to decide, you know, is Hong Kong going to be a place where we develop new ideas and innovations and technologies on green tech and fintech, etc., or is this a place where we really invite the rest of the world to come and sort of raise their capital and find their financing solutions? And maybe the answer is all of the above.
It's everything, really, isn't it? Yeah.
Has to be. Oops. So the more we can, so the more we can, you know, really start, I'm just going to say, properly working together, private sector, public sector, in Hong Kong and the region and beyond, then I think the better fighting chance we have to generate some much needed momentum and really accelerate some of the ideas that have already been formed, some of the proofs of concept that have already been developed, bring all these things to market in a way that puts Hong Kong, I think, very much, you know, on a pedestal. You know, I think broadly there are two things that we should be doing a lot better. One is we need to be much better at sort of incentivizing, and we can do that through sort of financial incentivization. We can do that through regulatory incentives as well. And the second thing we could be doing an awful lot better, I think, is showcasing what we've done, because we've actually done an awful lot. It's only been sort of 6 or 7 years, really, since there's been sort of tangible, a tangible commitment to sustainability through green finance, and as that's evolved. So none of us have been really working hard at this for that long, but in that time we've achieved actually quite a lot. So we need to know, maybe it's your point about we're good at ragging ourselves, we need to be much more confident about selling ourselves. And I like to think that, you know, if not at this COP, you know, in future COPs, you know, Hong Kong should be, it's a great opportunity for Hong Kong to promote our green tech, green fintech, green finance, you know, and so the list goes on, credentials to the rest of the world, share ideas, and of course try and bring clients to us.
Right. Well, certainly I think we are all keen to go out internationally and showcase Hong Kong. But also I think what CF needs is domestically, right here in Hong Kong, we need to reassure ourselves that we're doing things. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I do want to come to the audience. Do you have any ideas, or can you put your hand up and make an offer? How can we help CF to reach out through your networks, your professional groups, to gather information, right, so that he can take it up within government, scope 3 and all of that? Very keen to hear any ideas. Actually, I have one question here, which again talks about not just reporting, but action. Right? So Hong Kong needs to campaign for itself to do stuff. May I invite some comments?
Hello.
Yes.
I'm here.
Yes. Please tell us who you are. And
I'm David Chan. I'm from a solar energy company, Solar. My question is more specific, really. It relates to offer by us, I guess, in solar energy. I mean, the thing that I find a dilemma basically for Hong Kong is that the only main renewable energy that's currently available in Hong Kong is solar. And I mean, our company's doing well. We are actually one of the major companies in Hong Kong, but we were expecting the growth to be even higher than that. Solar energy currently takes up about 0.5% of the total energy usage. So the offer is basically, why is the Hong Kong not really as focused as we are on renewable energy? We could be. There is a lot more room to put solar panel. There could be rules, regulation could be relaxed for putting on disused land, on roofs, on not just for village houses or occasional industrial building, for instance. So the offer is basically for the government to maybe take a further step on how to enhance solar energy in Hong Kong to bring it to world standard, which is about 4 to 5% of, and that would make a serious difference to.
Yes, thank you. Now I'm going to take more questions so that we hear as many questions and comments as possible, and then the panel can give their comments. Yes, please ask your question.
KK Chen, Footprints Foundation. Special thanks to Christine, CF, Ben, George, and the host. I'm a retired person. Okay, happen to get some involvement in the environmental, and then I'm working on my PhD on ESG. Okay, questions. Thank you for Christine and CF for opening up the stage for us. Suggestions. Indeed, I think collaboration, not competition. Okay, indeed, Hong Kong got a very special and unique position, both in the location, in the background supported, as well as connected to Asia. And when Christine opening up the conversation in the first place, that we are vulnerable. Okay, our business are vulnerable. We're talking about a lot of SME, and then all the line up. My suggestion in the first place is that one, we have to engage all the stakeholders, not because they're big or small. Okay, we have to embrace the environment so that everybody, not just solar, everything online. Yeah, that is my message. Try to deliver. Okay,
Be more succinct because we're running out of time.
Okay, sorry about that. To make it short, is that we have a lot of stakeholders, and then we need to understand that where they're coming from, because besides money talk, technology talk, everything have to come in places. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Yes.
Hello, Bei Wong. I'm a maintenance surveyor. The quality of a city all depends on how it's designed, planned, constructed, and maintained. But the maintenance is not well understood by practitioners and the industry. We have more than 50,000 old buildings, aging and aging and aging, and concrete is falling every week down from those buildings. We call it gray buildings. Can the organization grant more money for those who can change gray buildings into green buildings and make them evergreen, so we can do something for the whole industry?
Anyone else? Yes.
Christine, thank you. Agnes Tai. I am with the Climate Governance Initiative at the headquarters and Hong Kong chapter. So I agree with Ben and that government needs to give us, the green tech companies, serious money. Serious, not that only when they have passed through the A series and then you fund the B series. You know, they need the help from very early on. So CF, it's good to see you again. The call for companies to take action now or else they won't have a business in the future has been a message that the Climate Governance Initiative and Hong Kong Institute of Directors has been putting forth in our board training programs for the last couple of years. So, but we need the government to take lead for the smaller, less resourced companies. For instance, if we can have a Hong Kong transition pathway like the UK has published recently, then we know that where our energy comes from. I know CLP is doing a great job, but there are so many initiatives that the government can actually take action rather than just going and ask the companies to help the government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, we only have less than 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of the panelists to share some of their comments with us. George, can I come to you first? You're muted, George. You're muted.
Thanks, Christine. I think this is great. In the interest of time, I make it quick also as a recap. I think from the private sector, now we need to upgrade ourselves from the traditional CSR approach, like what CF said, to this responsibility for sustainability and inclusiveness for all. I think this is where if we want to make money, and I believe green and growth can coexist, then the only way is to make sure that we win the climate war together. So collaboration is a key, and that is more and faster collaboration cross-sectoral with the government helping as well. And then I think another quick point is Hong Kong is well positioned to do more than just for our city. I think, as mentioned, we are a Green Finance Hub, ESG Center of Excellence, Green Tech Hub, you name it, we have it. We also have prop tech entrepreneurs and startups who can add to green buildings and so on. As you all know, more than 70% of emissions in Hong Kong come from built environment and the transport system. So we need to engage the youth and startups more. And another point is about PPP projects. Hong Kong has all the methodology and professional services and the rule of law, all of that to make sure that we become the PPP, the green PPP center of Asia. We can help to enable, promote, and facilitate more PPP projects to be financed properly, to be structured properly, and so on. This is where the private sector can come into play. And finally, we're in the middle of the GBA. GBA, the G is not for greater in terms of geographical coverage, is global and green. I think we are here to do more. Yeah, and by giving more, by doing more, we will gain more. And I think this is what I want the private sector to really step up the efforts and the commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Very succinctly, please, Ben.
I'd just like to respond to the comments from the gentleman over here in relation to renewable energy. I have some experience, and I share some of your, well, you were much more eloquent than I would have been, but frustrations about where we should be going and how we should be doing a lot more in Hong Kong vis-a-vis renewable energy. We all know it's complicated. We all know that there's costs involved. We all know that we look to mainland China for most of our energy solutions because it's going to be sort of more scalable and more cost effective, but there's lots that we can and I think should be doing. And perhaps we can continue that conversation offline. And to the lady's remarks over here about transition and transition pathways, then maybe it's something that our next panel will touch on because there is a lot of work, I think, going on in Hong Kong in respect of transition.
Terrific. You have the last word, CF.
Okay, thanks, Christine. One thing, when we appeal the general public to the business sector to work together with us, of course, I said I'm stand ready to respond to the call for government action. And if you look into this year's policy agenda, the policy address, you will see quite a lot of measures under the climate change. And I don't have the time. I know that I don't have the time to go through every of this one, or otherwise I will have another 20 minutes. But please work with us in taking forward these climate change measures, and a number of it is quite bold, including in particular the hydrogen strategy.
Well, I just want to say that what he needs and what the government needs is some more structured discussion. I think you know that, right? But organizing structured and ongoing discussion actually takes an awful lot of time. In a way, CF probably doesn't have time to do all of that, right? So we must help him. So if you can think of, within your network and groups, how you can convene meetings, and convening it's a freebie, how we can organize ourselves in society in ways where we can feed positive ideas, reasonably well worked out, to CF, and if we can have an understanding with you, CF, that those ideas would then be carried through within government, that we can go maybe over the next 2 years, that we could look forward to more being perhaps implemented in the policy address. I think if we can help you and work with you to do that in a more structured and organized way, I think people would be very, very willing. So please put your hands together and thank the excellent panel.
Thank you very much, Professor Lowe, and all panelists for the wonderfully rich discussion and meaningful points that you made. Please remain on stage as you would like to take a picture. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Goodbye, Dr. Lim. Thank you as well. Please bear with us for maybe a minute or so while we prepare the stage for the next panel discussion. Thank you. Now, while we are waiting, there's a QR code right on the screen. So, as mentioned, this is part of a series taking place in the coming 2 weeks. So please, when the crew moves aside, scan this code and register for any of the upcoming events in these 2 weeks. Okay, we're set. We'll now move on to our second panel discussion, moderated by Ms. Jenny Lee, who is the Deputy Secretary General of the Hong Kong Green Finance Association. Jenny, yes, you're right in front of me. Over to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That was an excellent panel just now. And on behalf of the Hong Kong Green Finance Association, I'd like to thank Arab for organizing this timely event. I think we have heard just now that fast-tracking the transition of businesses is key if we are going to address the climate change crisis, which we need to do so in order to avoid the most devastating impact on communities, people, and nature, which is what the COP28 will be focused on, both globally, regionally, and locally. Businesses are significant contributors to greenhouse gas emissions and environmental degradation. The energy consumed, the raw materials utilized, and the manufacturing processes employed, and also the transportation systems relied upon to businesses all have a significant carbon impact, and they all contribute to climate change. So corporates therefore have substantial influence and also resources to translate the high-level policies and strategies into tangible actions that we've heard is much needed. They are major drivers of economic activities. They have the power to shape markets, influence consumer behavior, and drive technological advancements. So in addition to the transition of corporates, the opportunity here, as we've just heard, comes forward in terms of unlocking new opportunities in financing, also in innovation, and also in driving a lot of this advancement in new industries and new jobs, which I think ultimately we have to be thinking about in terms of enabling a just transition. So in terms of this next session, we'll basically look to touch on some of these insights and practices in how these corporates are committing to their climate solutions, and also the collective action that they are taking across the different sectors to basically hopefully achieve what science says is needed to keep the world on track. So without much further ado, I'd like to welcome our panel speakers to the stage. First, we have Dr. Vincent Cheng, Fellow Director of Climate and Sustainability Services, East Asia, Arab. And next, I would like to welcome Donald Choi, Executive Director and CEO, China Chem Group. And then Jonathan Zhu, Vice President, Hong Kong Green Finance Association, Head of Global Banking Sustainability Asia Pacific, HSBC. And last but not least, Jim Taylor, Senior Director, Planning and Development, COP Hong Kong Limited. Thank you. Great. Also, similarly, make sure I don't fall off the chair. Similarly, we do have Q&A, so we'll allow time. If you have any questions for the panel speakers, please do put them through. Okay. So to kick this panel discussion off, my first question is to you, Jim. We've just heard CF Wong talk about the Hong Kong Government Climate Action Plan 2050, which sets out some of the measures for Hong Kong to decarbonize and how we can achieve our carbon neutrality goals and net zero electricity generation before 2050. With power generation being one of the main sources of greenhouse gas emissions, COP's role is absolutely critical. So where are we now and what challenges and opportunities do you see?
Okay, so the hard questions first then. I'm probably the oldest member on the panel, and I feel like I've been running a marathon here in COP. I've been working for COP for 20 years, but actually reducing carbon has been a long-term plan for COP. So nobody in this room will probably realize, but we began our race in 1990. Today, I send out 80% more power than I did in 1990. But I emit 20% less tons of carbon in doing so. So 80% more product, 20% less carbon, that's of today. But I've got a lot more to do. So you asked, where are we today? That is a long-term target, 2050. We have an interim target the government set for 2035. But as of today, the carbon footprint that I have in my operations is around 0.39 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. Now, is that good, bad, or indifferent? I'm talking about COP here in Hong Kong. I'm not talking about our Asia-Pacific operations. It varies from country to country. So to give you some context, that 0.39 is lower than Singapore. It's lower than Guangdong. And it's a heck of a lot lower than my home country, Australia. So we're doing okay, but there's a lot more to do. So 2035, government's climate action plan says that around about 70% of the power that I sell has to be zero carbon. Today, it's about half that level. So today my fuel mix is about 1/3 nuclear, 50% gas, and the rest is coal and a mixture of small amounts of oil and solar and so on. So it's fairly clean, but it needs to get a lot better. So if you take the government's climate change action plan for 2035, the targets, and you assume that coal will not be part of daily generation by 2035, which is the case, then that implies, if you work out the emissions coefficients, that my carbon intensity will be about 0.12 to 0.16 per kilowatt hour. That means, if I do my job properly to meet government's targets, I will cut the carbon content of the supplier for your buildings by 2/3 in just over 10 years. Now that's going to take a lot of work. Now, as somebody's pointed out, opportunities for renewable energy in Hong Kong are not huge. It's not got a lot of land. We have mostly the areas that are usable, Country Park or developed already. But I'm going to need to work with my neighbours, as many small cities around the world are doing. In London, Paris, they don't generate all their power themselves. They rely on the hinterland. The same is true for Hong Kong. So the Hong Kong government has set a program out to look at doing what we can locally. For example, we have a hugely successful feed-in tariff scheme here in Hong Kong, but also to rely on our brethren to the north of the boundary in terms of regional cooperation. And that, I think, will be the way forward. Today, 1 in 3 of these light bulbs comes with power supplied by Daya Bay. It's already zero carbon. We already have a good model for regional cooperation here in Hong Kong. So I think a lot of the focus in the next 10 years is about how to move that on to the next stage. How can we access additional supplies of zero carbon power without actually taking away from what Guangdong on the mainland already has planned. But for 2050, I think more can be done. So we've got a second stage of decarbonisation. We'll need to keep some generation here to underpin local reliability. And at the moment, we're looking at hydrogen. The key thing, there's a lot of hype about hydrogen, that's the H in hydrogen, by the way, hype, is it has to be zero carbon. Otherwise, it doesn't help. So we're looking at the longer term, availability, commercial terms for zero carbon hydrogen to bring into Hong Kong. Lastly, opportunities and so on. I think there's something that everybody can do that's in your power to do today. Technology is advancing really, really fast. When I came to Hong Kong 20 years ago, nobody had heard of induction cooking except in Japan. Today, there's a huge market share for induction cooking. 90% of the energy goes into the food. The more traditional methods, it's about half that. Internal combustion engine is about a third efficient. Electric motors are 90% efficient. Fuel cells are less. So think about your choices of technology. Think about where you can make a difference today. And last but not least, energy efficiency. Not just the hard stuff that the building experts, I'm sure, will talk about in a second, but the soft stuff. I've taken my jacket off today because it's too hot in here for me to sit up in front of the spotlights. So behavioral change is also important, getting people to understand the messages and to start working on what we all need to do, which is reduce carbon now. Okay, thank you.
That's great. It's good to see that Hong Kong's report card is on track, and if not actually performing better than I think we give ourselves sometimes credit for. And I think you know, the takeaway I have from here is also that we as ourselves as individuals can take our own action, not just for government and public sector and private sector. So moving over to the demand side, Donald, like obviously we've heard buildings account for 90% of the electricity used in Hong Kong, and generating over 60% of the 60% of the city's carbon emissions. So how do you see green building design playing a role in this, and what are the major initiatives and trends that we should be looking out for?
Well, I am an architect, so I believe in the power of design. Obviously, I think in designing building, it is critical in terms of advancing, you know, a more sustainable future. For new building, obviously the embodied carbon could be reduced by using more green material, having more passive design than active design. For example, cross ventilation for our residential units, having openable window for our toilets, the appropriate sun shading and so on. And also I think we must adopt technology in our building. You know, we can optimize the life cycle operation carbon emission, reducing them by actually so many new technology in terms of generative AI, machine learning to optimize the efficiency of our energy usage. But apart from new building, I think more important, and as I think the speaker has mentioned already previously, is about how can we actually reduce the energy usage of our existing stock. I think retrofitting, retro commissioning, they offer advantages, you know, and also quick win possibility. For example, I think retro commissioning, we can right away lower probably 15 to 20% of our operating costs. So in that respect, we need help from government as well as various organizations like URA. They are having actually you know, financial incentive to encourage even strata title owners to improve, you know, their energy system and optimization, etc. But more importantly, I think, is for us in the industry really to promote and share our knowledge with the community, so they understand the benefit as well as, you know, can be one of the most important stakeholders in our effort to further kind of reduce our energy use and ensure our future sustainable community.
That's great. I mean, I think in terms of embodied carbon and also looking at retrofitting of existing stock, I mean, that provides like tremendous challenges. And, you know, we have Vincent here who, you know, can you share with us some of these from a consultant's perspective, you know, how you help to support, you know, your clients in terms of this decarbonization of new build, but also on existing buildings. and and what types of new technologies and innovations are you seeing in the market that can help address some of these issues?
I think the entire transformation from what we call carbon lock-in economy into net zero economy will definitely revolutionize all the practices across all sectors. I think I totally agree with Donald. I think building probably by far is the most difficult one to work on. I mean that like Bei mentioned earlier, that we do have a lot of we call it retired building that are not that satisfactory in terms of performance. I'm sure that the works with GBC and others tirelessly in the past few years to develop a lot of guideline, but still, turn from this principle into kind of practices still need a kind of I would say impetus, in particular from public sector. So I think we definitely need a lot of policy support from government to create the critical momentum. So then there must be someone to start the whole thing. So I think, say for example, set a kind of minimum performance requirement for existing building, probably would be kind of a great start that we can work on. And then from there, I'm sure that we can capitalize the innovations from the industry and also capitals from the markets to scale things. So I would say that building is difficult, but technology is there, that we have all the kind of smart tech, green techs to collect the data and also do the kind of retrofit commissionings and to improve that. And I'm sure that there should be kind of solutions that we can all collaborate on buildings. And then on transportation, I think it's more promising that we saw the kind of big success in the past few years on that adoption of EV. Definitely the government actually have done a lot also that with the right policy, and that's why the policy is very important. So I'm not saying that we should all put all the kind of ask to the government, but definitely that we should start with somewhere somehow. I think on that and transport, I think Hong Kong is so unique. We already have very kind of well-established mass transit system, and I think and that's actually been electrified. So I think on top of that EV, definitely that we should try where we could develop this mass transit system as comprehensive as possible. The firm actually worked a lot on this and have to build and also design a new line for MTRC. I think that should be continue, and then it's kind of set kind of exemplary kind of exemplar in the world to showcase how transport actually can be as good as Hong Kong. That's I think something that we should work together on that end. Likewise, waste is also can provide a lot of opportunities. In Hong Kong that 1/3 of waste are food waste, and food actually, I mean it's not waste. Food actually can be transformed or converted into useful kind of energy. That I think is areas I think again provide a lot of renewable energy and sources that we can definitely tap on, and absolutely that. Because the government also like to use the market, to get the kind of green capitals, and that sort of mega kind of infrastructure projects that provide good opportunities for Hong Kong again to showcase the world that we are a place that we can create great projects for everyone, to be who are interested in this area to be part of it. So I think all in all that I think we try where we could, consultant. We at best we are a connector and of course that we like to also explore kind of technology, how far that can go into. But again, it's what today's firm actually the race itself is key, that we have to work quicker and I think more importantly collaboratively to get more opportunities for us to work on. In particular, we need new projects to energize our economies.
Now, I think you've given really great examples in terms of the collaboration that is happening already across different sectors in Hong Kong, and also to highlight kind of like some of the policies that actually we do need in place to kind of like drive a lot of the support and guidance for the kind of like property developers and also for the private sector to kind of like look at how they can also kind of like finance some of these initiatives. So Jonathan, we've heard on the earlier panel, faster, more abundant resources, green financing. It all seems to be leveraging in terms of how quickly can we finance this transition. I know transition finance is a very broad topic. It means different things to different people. And then hopefully you can share with us in terms of the role that financial sector can play in facilitating and accelerating this transition to net zero.
Jenny, thank you. Yes, a lot of buzzwords we've heard. I mean, the observation I would make is we can't finance faster than the investment is taking place. And the role of finance, to answer your question very simply, is listening to all of our clients arranged along this panel, understanding what they're doing to invest and to effect the changes in the physical world, because we're talking about removing carbon from our economic activities, and make sure we're there with the capital and the finance to support that happening. So that's the core role of banks and of the financial institutions, because it's not just bank and loan money, it's also how, through our other businesses and other financial institutions, direct capital to all of these productive uses that we've heard. So when Jim needs funding for Daya Bay, we need to be there. When Jim needs funding for 2 CCGT units out at Black Point, and then for the associated LNG import infrastructure, we need to be there with the money. When Jim wants to bring more renewables on and therefore he needs battery storage, we need to be there with that money. When eventually you start a hydrogen business, beyond the hype, we'll need to be there with some of that funding.
Depends
and of
on
course,
the rate.
And it's, we're talking here, we're looking at Jim because we're looking at the, obviously emissions come fundamentally and substantially from burning hydrocarbons. That's the energy supply piece. But then if you can cut your emissions embedded in a unit of power by 66%, I think you said, and if on the demand side, these clever people and everyone else who supports we can become twice as energy efficient or half the energy intensity. And then to keep Jim happy, we need to, as Vincent is saying, we need to electrify, even more electrification in the transport sector, because I'm sure you don't want too much energy efficiency and reduced.
I'm okay.
You're okay with that? As long as there's capital invested, you're okay. So as long as there's capital invested to deliver that low carbon energy, Jim's good. And if we add all of that up, and we'd find we're at, I don't know, I haven't done the maths, but we could have 90% of our way to CF's targets. So, and then of course, banks need to facilitate that on the demand side. We need to understand what Dominic's designing and how Vincent's engineering it and bring the capital for those, not just the new green buildings, but the retrofits. And we've talked about transportation. We need to get more innovative in the waste space. We need to get more innovative in energy efficiency space, and make sure that we're bringing the capital to support that. But the other thing I would say, and this goes to, I think, the point that Christine was raising, it's not just about bringing capital. I think financial institutions have something else that's very important. They have knowledge and experience, and they can act in a little way to convene themselves and bring parties together to support collaboration. And they also have an opportunity, and I think a big responsibility, to influence external parties. And I know I'm preaching to two of the ultimate convertees around the role of things like industry associations and the Green Finance Association, the Loan Market Association, to make the markets more efficient, sharing of information, so that we can get capital to where it's needed at a lower cost, because Jim's already had a go at me about funding costs, and of course we have to deliver cost-effective capital solutions. So that's that information, it's advisory, it's a risk management perspective, but it's also convening and influencing and helping to grow a robust market. And there are many, many financial institutions out there. I mean, George was very kind, he mentioned the bank I work for, but we're not alone. There are a lot of institutions who really are seeking to drive this, and we just have to do, to your question, more of that, get even closer, understand the needs so that we can then step up and deliver that capital.
And that's really important to know. And I guess in terms of, just going back to you, Jonathan, in terms of like, what are some of the challenges actually that you see most of kind of like clients faces when they come to HSBC or whichever banks for financing?
Well, I think the challenge is there aren't enough financially robust projects to finance.
Right.
So we've got to make and find more ways to make more of the technologies which are perhaps still emerging, to make them financially viable so that capital will and investment will flow to them. So, and that will require some, government support around policy. It also requires creating some sort of pockets of sort of risk appetite. So we need to understand sort of where perhaps some of those gaps are in some of the emerging technologies. So, I mean, we're trying to do some things in the area of, when one of the questions earlier, there was this sort of talk about, how do we get more capital into some of those sort of venture spaces? Now, I don't think most of HSBC's depositors, our customers who deposit with us, probably won't want to see us putting too much into startups, but we are growing a pot through a business we're now calling HSBC Innovation that will go in and put venture debt in at sort of Series A and beyond companies. So that's where we think it's right for us to be playing. And I know the government does have a lot of schemes as well. I heard the other day 17 different schemes that's put capital in to support startups. So there's something there. I think those are the areas we need to explore to get into your question, just find where some of those gaps are and how we can fill that so we can accelerate.
Yeah, that's great. And also I think another example is we've seen the Hong Kong Green Building Council, they've launched the Zero Carbon Ready certification, which then is actually, I think, an excellent structure in order to unlock some capital potentially into retrofitting financing for some of these existing built environment. And so switching gears a little bit, going back to you, Jim. So up until now, we've mainly spoken about transition to decarbonize. What other transitions do you see taking place in the energy sector around, for example, climate adaptation?
That's another really good question, actually not easy. Forecasting is not a perfect science, as we all know, but we've been working with the observatory and, in fact, with a number of environmental consultants and with government to look at how we can future-proof our systems. Now, why is that important? Well, today, 60% of all the end-use energy used in this city is electricity. If I mess it up, we have a big problem. How many people are going to get home tonight, let alone this week? It's going to be very difficult. So we need to think about how we can plan for resilience. And actually, I'll talk a little bit more about the physical side in a second, but one other major challenge that many countries are facing right now is the energy crisis that we've recently gone through. Now, overseas, typically, and somebody was telling me before the seminar, that they were staying with somebody in the UK who was spending £20 a day on power. Now, the rises from COP in the energy crisis were 20%. In London, they were nearly 100. In many other locations, they've been a lot more. One of the benefits we've had from our planning with Daya Bay is the stability of that nuclear price. That enabled me to hold the tariff increase to about 20% at peak, and it's dropping fast now. So another challenge is affordability. How people in Hong Kong are going to pay for the transition. So we will do our best to try and minimize the cost of that. So if I can repurpose those new CCGTs that somebody's kindly helping me with to run on green hydrogen in the future, that saves a lot of money. And I think I can do that. If I can get very good green finance from a couple of people on this panel, that would be really, really helpful too. If building owners can work with me on our energy efficiency schemes that we have working in Hong Kong, then we have a win-win for the environment and for both those operators and for CLP. But let's talk a little bit more about the hard issues. I have, on my first trip out of Hong Kong this year, spent a bit of time overseas, and while I was away, I understand we had a dress rehearsal for climate change. Black rain, the worst storm in 140-something years. We also had a super typhoon. I have to pay credit to the government. Nowhere else but Hong Kong could be that well prepared. I mean, it's a fantastic achievement. Putting things in place with DSD, WSD, with all the infrastructure planning that's been done. The inconvenience was significant for a number of customers and for a number of people here in Hong Kong, but not major. For CLP, we had a very limited number of interruptions to our customers off supply, very, very small number indeed, in both the Super Typhoon and in Black Rain. And maybe I should also pay tribute to our guys who are out there in those conditions, fixing it up when something goes wrong. But let's talk about 3 of those areas in particular. So I'm going to look at heat, I'm going to look at flooding, and I'm going to look at typhoons. So let's look at heat. So do I want my people out working in the new territories in 40-degree days, fixing things? I'm going to have to be very careful about how I do that. How can I help customers with the exposure to rising temperatures, particularly in residential properties? Our largest customers already have smart meters. You can already monitor the consumption in your buildings extremely well. But I plan to roll out smart meters for all my residential customers. They can manage their bills via an app, almost real time, to look at their consumption, manage the budget, and manage the temperature at the same time as best they can. I think also we are doing something which is not common. You wonder why an electricity company would be paying its customers to use less power. In the summer, I already pay the industrial and commercial customers to cut back on their consumption at times of peak demand. I'm also starting to do that for residential customers. I ran a trial this summer, and I had hundreds of thousands of residential customers participate at times of peak demand on summer evenings to reduce their consumption. That saves me having to build so much infrastructure. It's a much more efficient way of operating the system. That's a little bit about heat. Now, what about flooding? Black Rain, as I say, a really remarkable event. I just can't believe how much rain fell in 24 hours. I was born in Kent in the UK. They get that much rain in 8 months. I had it here in 24 hours. Just phenomenal. One of the things that we've done is to do flood risk assessments for all our major substations. And we've fitted sump pumps, we've fitted flooding barriers, we've actually fitted stuff to make sure they don't flood. But actually, many customers for their substations have not done the same. So building owners, building operators, please check your substation locations. If you need advice, talk to CLP, but you need to do your bit too. Otherwise, the end result, I can say on TV, my network is operating normally, but if they're off power, they're still off power. I think, you know, we've got generation plants on the coast, so we've done our bit to look at the risks from sea rise as part of that approach. Lastly, typhoons. We have, with government support, future-proofed our overhead lines. We have a lot of overhead lines in new territories for 300 kph plus winds. We've also done work to stabilise the slopes on which those towers sit. That's important, obviously, with the recent landslips that we had in the Black Rain incident. And I think the last thing is, and I'm hoping that when CLP hear what I'm going to say, they don't call me up as a result in sort of typhoon conditions. But I used to live in Australia, and I had something called a chainsaw. Actually, I had 2, and I was fully trained on how to use them at where I lived in Australia. CLP has now trained its emergency crews in how to use chainsaws, because to get powers back on supply, we can't wait. Given the limited resources government have, and the police have, to open up all the roads when trees come down, sometimes we have to clear our own way to get there. So I just want to reassure people here that we've gone through a number of dress rehearsals. We think we're well prepared, but we all need to work better to make sure that we are fully prepared. The network, the customer, and the end user.
I think that's excellent. I think often we focus only on mitigation and not really on the adaptation piece. And we really need to start putting some more focus and energies and even financing into looking at even like sea level rise, to the heat, the typhoons and flooding, etc. So, to a question for you, Vincent. From an Arab perspective, you have the firm has been one of the front runners when it comes to shaping the sustainable built environment. So, how are you transitioning as a company, and what themes do you see as gaining more importance and traction with your clients?
Yeah, definitely that we need to walk our talk, right? I think there are 3 things that the firm is working hard, of course, partnering with our collaborators. Well, first is on that climate mitigations. I think we commit, like many other companies, we commit that 1.5 degrees kind of initiative. And importantly, we commit to have net zero operation by 2030s for Scope 1 and 2. And by 2040s, Scope 3 also. So that's I think is important that we like to lead by example. Secondly, that we also committed not to work on fossil fuel related projects. I think that's from mitigating sides, it's important that we show everyone that we want to help. It's not only by working with partners, more importantly that ourselves actually, how small, how big the company, can still contribute a lot on some of the work. But in particular, we are a consultant that we sort of our footprint is small compared with our handplanes, meaning that the kind of projects, be it buildings or infrastructure we're on, will emit a lot of carbon. So we work with our partners to have this kind of net zero design element in it and try to reduce our handprints on that. So that's on the climate mitigations. And likewise, we also look into that resilience issues seriously. That's why we have set up a team that dedicates to carry out the kind of climate risk, physical risk kind of assessment, so that partners, business projects, mainly at project levels, that we know how vulnerable, the sort of our assets or our critical facility are suspected to. Then, and thirdly, I think it's also important, it's getting more and more important, is on the nature. We know it probably will take years or even decades for this mitigations or adaptations into effect, but our nature can't wait that long. So that's why that globally, again, we work with our partners like WWF, to work out, specifically for different of its geographies, that what sort of applicable solution that can be applied. So I think all in all, we like to collaborate, to work more, to help to build up the kind of natural capitals and in addition to minimize the kind of carbon footprints of our operations.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I guess, moving along in terms of thinking about the transition, it's not just transitioning buildings, infrastructure, building new seawalls, etc. We also need to think about the people and kind of like how that impacts people with all these changes and new economies that are starting up. What steps, I guess, Chinacam, as the group sustainability conference for pioneering net inclusive net zero future for Hong Kong, what steps have your firm taken in order to kind of like bring this inclusiveness and bringing people along with the journey as well?
Well, it's a really good question, because I think, for us to achieve our triple bottom line, is not just about sustainability or prosperity, economic benefit, but also about making a positive impact in our community, and that involves people. Again, I think the just transition, many people have talked about how it can be done so that nobody is being left behind. For example, in our construction, we are adopting MIC. Again, the modular integrated construction methodology obviously save on a lot of construction waste. It's a more sustainable construction methodology, but also it is a safer construction method, which actually make our site much safer for the workers as well. So when we look at any solution and we talk about a decision to be made, we always, weight it against our 3 Ps, people, planet, and also prosperity. I think it's a mindset change that we need to be putting a lot of resources so that we can ensure that what we are doing not only benefit the environment, but also improve people's quality of life.
And I guess the same question to you, Jonathan, in terms of when we talk about transition finance, then we also need to look at how, in the longer time horizon, how do you ensure that there is also a just transition as well? Do you then build like KPIs to kind of like encourage, the borrowers to actually have a plan in place?
Well, I think, Jenny, just transition is super complex, and we need to do probably a number of things. I mean, Donald's story there, we need to project that loud and clear as to sort of how, corporates can and perhaps ought to be thinking about the wider impacts and the wider benefits they bring, and making sure that that's better understood and the actions that they are taking. But there's also that sort of linking back to the earlier conversation around adaptation, where of course many of the, the worst impacts of climate are going to hit some of the most disadvantaged people on this planet the hardest. And that's a massive problem. And as to how, some of those costs will be affected and or met, it's highly political. It's probably driving, the adherence to the 1.5 degree targets at the moment, when, the Earth scientists are probably saying, well, we're pretty much there and going beyond, because obviously the implications of going beyond 1.5 are, dramatic, again, according to the scientists. So there's a huge challenge there, and I suspect that might just be, the current conversation around sort of loss and damage, which is sort of backward focusing onto who did what that might have caused sort of harm, is only the beginning. I won't use the tip of the iceberg analogy, it's probably not appropriate, but the beginning of a conversation around compensation for some of these global impacts, when sea levels will, deprive island nations of their homes, and they will dramatically impact coastal communities, particularly rural and agricultural communities. There'll need to be compensation. That's even before thinking of the knock-on impacts in terms of financial and social impacts. And then within, just transition, you've got the sort of the concepts around in terms of the actual action that's being taken. You've got complex areas such as human rights to deal with, and how do we, what and which communities might be being adversely impacted by the drive into, renewable energies, and that's on both sides. The sort of the behaviours in the new economy, as well as the communities in the old economy, where masses of jobs will be lost, and how do those people get redeployed? Because it's not so simple to say, well, you take a coal miner and turn them into a wind farm installer. That's not a straightforward substitution. And then when we also think about how do we address challenges such as decarbonisation, thinking about sort of pathways, and Vincent talked about sort of pulling back from financing in the fossil fuel sector. Well, yes, but we have to be careful with that, because we also have to remember that fossil fuels to a significant extent are going to be required to actually drive and energize the transition. One of the biggest demands for fossil fuel today is the new economy and the desire to build the new energy systems. So as with every energy transition throughout history, you've had to use a lot of the old energy to build the new energy system. So it can't just be a simple divestment story. And then at the next level, back to just transition, so whose hydrocarbons do we use? Do we allow an emerging market today that may not have developed its own resources to develop its own resources, in the knowledge that for any given carbon pathway, that means some resources somewhere else, if those are utilized, won't be used? Is that just? Should we facilitate that? Should we finance that? Or do we say to the emerging market, no, you can't do that. You need to buy your hydrocarbons from somewhere else. These are all of the sort of the massive, I think, or just another of the massive challenges around that a much broader concept of just transition. Something as a big global financial institution, it's taxing us as to how we get that right, because it's so complex.
So we'll just hold that thought and put a pause on there, because clearly we could also talk about this for another 1 to 2 more hours, because we could be passing the mic over to Jim as well. In the interest of time, I would like to open up the floor for any questions. We do have 2 minutes. We actually, from the audience, there was only one which was really talking about here, how can I contribute and benefit? Again, I think you've heard from the panelists today, it's really not just about the government or the financiers or the consultants or the corporates that need to take action. We ourselves can do our part in terms of how we choose to kind of utilize our resources that we have to hand. So I'd just like to open the floor to any questions. We have the mic over there.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question to Jonathan. As I see it, Jim sends a lot of our money abroad. You buy the fuel, you buy the machinery for generating electricity. How does that Hong Kong pay for that? And I would see Hong Kong's financial services, of which Jonathan is a representative, as one of our big ways in which we can earn money for abroad to pay for that. Now, Jonathan, are you at a disadvantage? Last year, there was the Indonesian Just Energy Transition Partnership arrangement, and I'm pleased to see at the beginning of this month there's a report on accelerating its progress, and it talks about the 20 billion being 10 billion from the private sector, which includes HSBC, good, and then 10 billion which is public money, which does not include Hong Kong. Does this put you at a disadvantage? I mean, the experience I've had in the distant past of trying to collect money from debtors in Indonesia is it's much easier if you have a government body going along with you, an export credit guarantee body in my case, to persuade the Indonesians that they really need to pay up eventually. It takes time, but eventually. And we've got September this year, a 15 billion Just Energy Transition Partnership being announced for Vietnam. Now, in the past, a lot of, as I would understand it, Hong Kong's financial services money has come from financing projects around the region. Are we going to find ourselves disadvantaged given that our government isn't coming to the table on this?
Well, thank you, Robert. I think there are one or two questions in there. I think your first one is around energy, and the question about, Jim, are you paying away all of our money? Or, I mean, Hong Kong needs energy, and to your point, a lot of that energy, as we've discussed, goes into our buildings, and there's a lot of financial services activity happening in those buildings. We consume more energy than we sort of have here or can convert here, so we need to import, and yes, clearly we have to pay for that. Can we afford it? I think whilst we have, and whilst we continue to be able to monetize what we do have here, both from a geographic position that positions us as a great sort of physical trading hub, our ports and so forth, whilst we have, and off the back in a sense of that trading background and culture, we've developed really strong and robust sort of, leaving aside the political aspects, rule of law in the commercial world. We've got great regulation of our markets, and I'm not just saying that because the regulators might be in the room. I'm not sure whether they are or not, but we've got very well functioning markets, and that facilitates us to do all of those, provide for value those financial services. We're fortunate, of course, we have some great clients, and we're able to sort of connect between that huge engine of the Chinese economy and the rest of the world. We're in a brilliantly privileged position there. So yes, we have a good degree, fortunately, of affordability. I think your other question was, are we somehow at a disadvantage because we're not contributing to government funding to things like the Just Energy Transition Partnership in Indonesia, and is that impacting us? I don't think so. I mean, obviously, in the world of climate, as probably you know better than anyone in the room, Robert, Hong Kong sort of negotiates as part of a wider China negotiation. There are a lot of big China initiatives around supporting infrastructure. China's leadership of AIIB being just one of those. I think Hong Kong has many of the institutions, the private sector institutions, again, as you know, Robert, are very active in that Just Energy Transition Partnership. This, for people who may not be familiar with that acronym, maybe I'll take 30 seconds in case Robert and I are talking in Greek to some of you here. JETP is about sort of really advanced economies supporting an accelerated transition away from coal-fired power in Asia's emerging markets, the sort of lower middle income markets, Indonesia, Vietnam, to give a couple of examples. And it involves a number of things, some private and perhaps public sector money going into finance renewables, but also money going in through something called the Energy Transition Mechanism, whereby middle-aged, I'll call them, coal-fired power plants are acquired, and there's an agreement to retire them early, substitute the power with the new renewables being built. There are many financial institutions in this town who are actively involved in that. It will come up as a topic at COP. It'll be one of those sort of non-negotiated agenda items at COP. It's something that Hong Kong as a financial services centre can play a big role in. And Robert, no, I don't think it's disadvantaged by anything the government is or isn't doing, and overall, specifically, and overall very much advantaged by what we've built as Hong Kong over the past 100+ years.
Great. I think we are almost out of time, but we have time for one more quick question, a very quick question. And just so you know, the panelists will be available afterwards if you stay behind for drinks, so you can follow up with more detailed questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to ask. It's Ambrose Chong from the Institution of Civil Engineers, Hong Kong Association. Thank you very much for the excellent panel for highlighting, enlightening us on some key issues on transition, preparedness, and also for the adaptations. It reminds me of one of our recent international conference organized by the Hong Kong IE at the Institution of Civil Engineers in London last week on infrastructure resilience. One of the key messages out there is quite relevant to today's discussions is actually it boils down to all these climate change, it will boils down to people, how it impacts people and how people will react to it and our behavioral change. And so it's not just a matter of we make it more efficient in using energy and also cut decarbonization, but actually in reality, we can envisage we are facing a growing and in fact a major increase in the power demand in particular in cooling. So I think it also relates to our earlier sessions discussions on collaborations. So actually it boils down to collaboration. So I just want to ask how we could collaborate with each other in preparing for ourselves for much higher power demand and for our built environment experts in designing our buildings and also making a more efficient cooling system in particular to face this new behavioral change for human beings. Thank you.
I'll just give a very quick answer, is projects. We heard from Jonathan that we are lack of good quality projects. If you can create more projects, then definitely a lot of collaboration can be in place on that.
Well, I think district cooling actually is a good example where we don't actually look at solutions in isolation for ourselves, but actually we look for a solution for the community.
I think it's conversations, understanding, learning what we're missing, trying to build a knowledge about what we don't know, the things we don't know about, and where that's how we'll fill the gaps.
Okay, 2 quick points. One is, I think, where we can individually take action, we should. So, for example, we talked about the electrification of transport. If everybody here has an electric vehicle and you charge it at the same time, isn't going to help my system. Can you please charge it at 3 o'clock in the morning when there's not a lot of other demand? Just being sensible. One final comment from me. I'm quite taken with the comments that Richard made about Hong Kong. Look, Hong Kong doesn't have a huge number of natural resources. It's never had. For me, Hong Kong's major competitive advantage is its people. Hong Kong is its people. The same as Singapore. It only survives because of its people. And by working together, we can help mitigate the impacts of climate change, and we can be a force for change in the wider planet. People can lend money to the right projects. People can have the right technical skills to build the right buildings. People can have the right technical skills to specify the right projects looking ahead. But individually, we can also all make a difference. The decisions you make today, how you're going to get home. I'm going to be taking public transport. Do what you can today. Today will make a bigger difference than 20 or 30 years in the future.
Great, thank you so much. Please give our panel speakers a big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, and the 4 fine gentlemen. Please remain on stage as we would like to take a photo with all of you. Thank you very much. Please be seated again. Now, to close today's event, may I please invite on stage Mr. James C., East Asia Region COO of Arab. Mr. C., over to you. Thank you.
Jenny, Jonathan, Ben, Vincent, and Jim. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining today's session, and my heartfelt gratitude to all the speakers and also those who have contributed to the event. Today we have witnessed a remarkable gathering of minds united by a common goal to accelerate the transition to a sustainable and resilient future for Hong Kong and also Asia. And today I do feel we are transitioning through kind of like listening to all the speakers. Through our time together, we have explored the challenges as well as opportunities, the climate change that might bring to Hong Kong, our society, our industry, and also the entire world. Through talking with different kind of like stakeholders before the event, I can feel that we are all with a heart to change and to transition. Some of you are working on policies, some of you are working on strategies, some are designers that work on kind of like greener buildings, sustainable designs, and some are kind of like stakeholders that to bring the designs into reality. And I think it's most important that we see all of us kind of like are committed to join force to drive a positive change and shape a better environment for our future generations. However, we must acknowledge that for our kind of like, the race is far from kind of like over, with kind of like representatives from 100 organizations that gather in this venue today. We must continue to foster partnership, leverage on collective knowledge, and resource to create an enabling kind of like environment to innovate, to kind of like invest, and to make policy that will accelerate the transition to a greener Hong Kong. And I hope that will become a role model for the remaining cities across East Asia or Asia. As we live the event today, let's carry the momentum forward and inspire others to collaborate. I heard the collaboration a few times today. That's the most important kind of like takeaway for me in taking actions to make long-lasting positive impacts. Not just within our own networks, that's important, of course, but I think that are kind of like other stakeholders in the other camps that they feel indifference to climate change. That's much related to Scope 3 emissions that I heard again a few times today. Last but not the least, I hope you enjoy the remaining kind of like mingling session that to learn the latest news and also you get some insights from kind of like others during the kind of like chit-chat session. Thank you again and see you next time.
Thank you very much, Mr. C. Please, everybody, stay in your seats. One more announcement is that, of course, all of the panel discussions today are being recorded, so they will be made available later on in due course, so that you can re-watch, because I think there was a lot of information and a lot of material to digest, and also to kind of think about what next actions you can take. It's one of the key messages I took away. Other than that, I think for the online audience, that's it for today. So hopefully you will join us for any of the other events that are happening throughout the coming 2 weeks. For people here in the Zero Carbon Park, please remain seated as we would like to take some photos with the various speakers and the various organizations that helped us to set this up. For now, thank you very much, and please give an applause to everybody who contributed to the event today.